Okay, so do you plan to join any committees or clubs? Do you have expertise in a specific area that you feel would enrich the program? Are you multilingual? Have you lived in multiple countries and have an understanding of the healthcare systems in different cultures? That's just one example of a unique skill set that someone might bring to the table. It varies with the person. It could be anything. But think about whether you have special qualifications, special gifts that would really enrich the program that you're applying for. And if so, by all means, give examples of those in your personal statement. Some schools may ask you to describe your research interests. We saw that in a couple of the prompts. This could be in addition to or instead of a discussion of your personal qualities. So always adhere to your prompt. Pay very close attention to your prompt. I cannot stress that enough. That is the quickest way to get rejected, is to ignore a requirement. So another thing that was a common theme in the survey that I did of faculty that sit on admissions boards at colleges of nursing is be specific. So one of the really common pet peeves is a lot of sort of cliche generalizations. So you want to always be specific instead of general. Instead of saying something like, I believe in hard work and dedication, you want to give an example from your life that shows that you're dedicated, that shows that you work hard. So a story, an anecdote, an example is going to be much more powerful than for you to simply say, I believe in hard work and dedication. Because you can believe me when I tell you everybody says that. But not everybody can provide a good example that shows that. So instead of saying something like, I love learning, you can describe the continuing education, training, and educational opportunities you've taken advantage of. See, again, that's specific versus general. Instead of saying that you're well-rounded, you can describe the range of different skills and experience and knowledge that you have acquired. And that, again, is specific instead of general. Some red flags for admissions boards. Vagueness, we just talked about that. General instead of specific. Cliche, things that everybody is sort of going to say. One thing that I know just from having read a lot of people's personal statements is almost everybody will say something like, I've always wanted to be a nurse. I've wanted to be a nurse ever since I was a small child. And I don't mean to diminish that in any way, because that's wonderful if that's true. It's just a simple matter of you want to make yourself stand out. So, you want to avoid falling in step with everybody else. You need to give specific examples. So vagueness is a red flag. Lack of focus is a red flag. A statement that kind of meanders all over the place. As a person who doesn't seem to have a clear idea of what they want out of a graduate program, of why they want to pursue graduate study, of the type of goals that they have. That's lack of focus. Poor grammar, poor spelling, poor sentence structure, those are huge red flags, because that, again, shows a lack of care, a lack of attention. I can tell you as a writing teacher that up to, about 80%, I think is the latest figure from the research, of sentence level errors, meaning errors in grammar, sentence structure, punctuation, will self-correct with careful proofreading. So that means that if you have a lot of errors in your paper, that probably means that you didn't proofread it carefully enough. And people know that. Professors know that. Admissions board members know that. And so it shows a lack of care, and that's a huge red flag. Poor presentation. If there's a coffee stain on your essay, if it's wrinkled, if the formatting is messed up, there's too many spaces between a couple of lines or something like that, lack of proofreading, all of that, those are all huge red flags. Let's talk about some do's and don'ts. Do use clear, straightforward language. You don't want to sound flowery. People will sometimes, if they are new to the idea of scholarly writing, they will sort of try to sound smart by using a lot of flowery language. You don't want to do that. Now, you don't want to be overly casual. You don't want to use slang and things like that, but that doesn't mean that you have to be super formal or flowery. You want clear, straightforward, simple language. Avoid wordiness, avoid unnecessary repetition, otherwise known as redundancy. Don't use contractions, so don't, isn't, won't. Say do not, is not, will not. Um, Clarity and conciseness are key because those are key to scholarly writing. And you want to demonstrate in your personal statement that you have the qualifications necessary for a successful scholarly writer. Do use descriptive, vivid language and active versus passive voice. So a quick thumbnail sketch of that. Passive voice is a grammatical structure in a sentence that puts the emphasis on the recipient of an action instead of on the actor. So passive voice would be, my goal was achieved. So that puts the emphasis on the recipient, the goal, versus on the actor, I. So active voice puts the emphasis on the actor. I achieved my goal. Another example would be the study was conducted by me. That's passive voice. I conducted the study is active voice. And you want active voice. It's more direct, it's more concise, it's clearer. So active voice is good. You absolutely do need to use the first person in a personal statement. A lot of us have been told never use the first person in academic writing. You should be wary of advice that uses the word never, because that tends to result in the writing serving the rule instead of the rule serving the writing. You want your writing to be served by the rules, not the other way around. That's like the tail wagging the dog. So sometimes some of those archaic rules that we were taught don't really apply. Like, for example, another one is when people say never end a sentence in a preposition. Well, you know, that's an archaic rule. Sometimes you have to, or else you're going to have to twist yourself into a verbal pretzel to avoid it. So there are times when the first person is appropriate and even preferable in academic writing, and a personal statement is one of those times. Don't refer to yourself as this author or something awkward like that in order to avoid it. And, you know, the statement's about you, so go ahead and talk about yourself. Do use specific, vivid examples to illustrate main points. And this is because stories are much more memorable than explanations. You can explain something beautifully, but if you tell a story that shows how it works, it's going to stick in the reader's mind so much better. And I'll give you a quick example of this. See, examples are good. I worked with a group of nurses a few years ago, and they were doing a presentation for their nurse managers about a particular intervention that they had started on their floor. And if I remember correctly, the intervention was a quiet hour. So they started this quiet hour where patients weren't supposed to be disturbed unless it was an emergency, and when everybody was supposed to kind of try to keep their voices down and allow patients an hour of repose. There was an old guy that was a regular patient at the hospital, and he happened to be there when they implemented this quiet hour. Now, he had been married to his wife for 50-some years, and they had had this ritual where every night he liked to read to her. And when he was in the hospital, they were unable to do that. And it was a really special thing for them that they'd been doing for years and years. And this quiet hour enabled them to do this again and have that really beautiful, special time together that they always had. So it meant a lot to them to be able to have that, even though he was in the hospital and they were going through all this stress. And when I worked with these nurses, initially in their presentation, they just said, the quiet hour has been very popular among patients. And then they moved on. And I said, well, okay, it's been very popular. Talk to me a little bit about that. And they told me that story. And I said, oh my gosh, you've got to put that story in your presentation because it's going to make that point so much more memorable and so stronger and really bring it home. It's going to put a face on that idea that this was popular among the patients. So we put that story in. Now, doesn't that stick in your mind so much more than me simply saying the quiet hour was popular? That's what I mean when I say that stories are more memorable than explanations. So use specific examples, vivid examples that illustrate main points. And that goes back again to being specific instead of general. You do not want to waste time telling the admissions board what they already know. So don't list the qualities possessed by the best nurses. They already know those qualities. Instead, what you could do is you could give some specific examples that illustrate that you have some of those attributes and abilities. You could tell about an intervention that you developed, or a time when you went on a trip abroad so you could help after a hurricane somewhere or something like that. So again, examples and specificity. You don't need to include every detail of your undergrad or professional experience, because obviously that information is going to appear in your CV, on your transcript, but you do want to hit the high points, the most important things, the things that really show that you are ready for this, that you are qualified for this, that you have particular interests and experience and strengths. So the bullet points, the high points. Do submit a professional, clean, impeccably proofread statement. Don't use gimmicks, so you want to avoid things like fancy fonts, colors or images, poetry, verse, etc., etc. You don't want to be Elle Woods from Legally Blonde. So you want a very professional, think business professional application. What to include and what to leave out. So always follow your prompt, but prompts can sometimes be short and non-specific. The ones that I showed you are pretty specific, but sometimes prompts will be real vague. So if that happens to you, you want to definitely include any academic or professional achievements that set you apart, especially if they relate directly to your stated academic or career goals. So this might include things like internships, publications, posters, presentations, even if it's just for your managers on your floor. It doesn't have to be at a conference or something. Study abroad or nursing abroad trips, community outreach, volunteer work, anything like that. Include any special skills that set you apart. Mention any research experience or skills that you have. If there are inconsistencies in your record, then you can explain that in your personal statement. So for example, let's say your transcript is going to show that you took a year off at some point, and you would like to explain that you did that because your mom was sick and you had to take care of your family. So that gives you a chance to explain that. Avoid cliche introductions like, I have always been fascinated by blank. I have always wanted to help people ever since childhood. Now again, I don't mean to negate that or to diminish its importance. It's wonderful if those things are true. It's just that everybody tends to say that. So instead of just starting with something that everybody else is going to say, think about, what can I show that really is going to set me apart and make them remember me. If you want to discuss what led you to nursing, do so in specific terms, with a story that illustrates what sparked your interest. Definitely don't include anything that's not relevant to your main points, anything that's inaccurate or exaggerated or untrue. There's sort of this myth floating around that, well, everybody lies or everybody exaggerates in their personal statement or in their resume. That's really not at all true. And it's not just about ethics. It's that your statement should really accurately reflect your true interests and your expertise so that you are sure to be paired with the best program for you. And that is going to require complete candor. In addition to that, admissions faculty, they read hundreds of these personal statements and they get really good at spotting exaggerations. Now, of course, I don't think any of you watching this would do this, but it does bear saying, because people do try things like that sometimes and it usually backfires. So make sure you are scrupulously honest and don't exaggerate anything. So I don't know if anyone watching is an English as a second language applicant, but if so, you might want to consider getting some one-on-one help with your statement to not only write a better statement, but also to prepare for the intense amount of writing and reading required in a graduate program. Now, the University of Kentucky has a Center for English as a Second Language. They offer classes and workshops and other resources, and there is their URL right there, if you want to pause that and write it down. You also might want to, that should say Canvas instead of Blackboard, but you might want to check out the Canvas Writing Resources page if you're a UK student or UK nurse, because there are quite a few second language resources there. They're in the useful websites part. There's sites that offer grammar guides, TOEFL prep, all sorts of stuff, in addition to some printable resources. So that Canvas page is a great resource for native speakers as well. Just lots and lots of general tips on writing and grammar, including this PowerPoint. So check that out if you haven't yet. And if you don't know how to sign up for that, just email me and I will tell you how. All right, so I think I'm going to stop here. The rest of it is some tips on proofreading and whatnot, and we're running out of time. But you can view this PowerPoint presentation in full on the Canvas Writing Resources page if you want to see those last few slides. And I hope this has been helpful for you guys. Have a great day and best